Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of July the 10th, a little after 1 p.m. And the first thing we're going to have is the Pledge of Allegiance, and Mr. Limegruber is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
Everyone, please stand. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Wally. Okay, is there where's Mr. Garber? Mr. Garber, you have any actions taken out of closed session to report?
The board directed that the budgets of Mr. Swan and Carter be combined for the year 2012, and I have nothing further to report.
Okay, thank you. Then we have the approval of the order and agenda items.
Move to approve.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Please vote. Thank you. Now we're going to move to public comments, and if anybody has any public comments, please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, board members, audience. My name is Tony Ramos. You know, one of the worst things to do when you come to a public podium is try to mix religion with politics, because as God says, what is Caesar's is Caesar and what is God is God's. But sometimes I'm going to put myself on the spot by saying this. I read Proverbs today, and it says, "The fallow ground of the poor will yield much food, but is swept away through injustice." That's Proverbs 3. And then beyond that, in Proverbs, it says, "The rich and the poor meet together, and the Lord is the maker of them all." Like here, I consider myself maybe not poor, really not rich, because I don't make over $100,000 a year. Probably make a little over 80. And it says, "Whoever sows injustice will reap calamity, and the rod of his fury will fail." Also, it says, "Whoever oppresses the poor to increase his own wealth, or gives to the rich, will only come to poverty." And sometimes I feel, ladies and gentlemen, and excuse me for bringing this up, is that politics brings in this type of thing. Like, for instance, you know, I will never talk about family members or personal issues, but sometimes when you talk about family members and they gain monies from public funds, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, for instance, John Benson, combined total fouling from 2004 to 2011 is almost $412,000 for fouling, for not planting, for not sowing seed to grow a crop. Who this man is, I don't know if there's any relation to Mr. Benson, the one that's running for IID. And then, but if there is, there's a conflict right there, because to me, people that fellow land shouldn't have representatives of people in the board that are going to ease the way for them getting the more money. And also say Bruce Kuhn signed the QSA to sell water in San Diego, then receives $210,000 in farm service providers money coming through the local entity. Claiming he lost out on the land leveling and fallow land. So that's what I'm saying. I have never myself benefited from fallowing. And that's the bottom line. Even when I come here, I'm in nobody's hip pocket. I'm not in the board's hip pocket. I'm in nobody's hip pocket. The IV First spent almost $115,000 in trying to unseat JP and Stella. Almost $80,000 that was spent on advertising in the radio, TV, and IV Press. And who were the donors? Well, let me give you some names because I won't have time to see them. One of them was Jack Brothers, Alex Jack, $5,000. El Toro Land and Cattle Company, La Brucherie, $5,000. And I'll just give the high ones here. Scaroni Properties, Steve Scaroni, $2,500. Mad Jack Farms, Jimmy Abadi, $5,000. West Grove Farms Incorporated, Joe Tack, $3,000. Let's get a good one here. Bayo Ranchers, LLC, Elmore Family, $10,000. My good friend Mike Abadi there. $5,000. His brother, Jimmy, I think, also gave $5,000. But you know what I like about the Abadi brothers? They don't follow. It's ironic, but they don't follow. And I'm glad, Mr. Abadi, if that's true, that you don't follow, because to me, following is the easy and lazy way of making money at the expense of the people. You know, it's hard for me to come up here and criticize people, but I'm doing it openly so they can come back and criticize me. And that's why I say, talking from the Bible, it says, well, how can Tony say that? Well, I say that because I was the one that represented In God We Trust here, also at the IID here, at the one in is it what? La Quinta. And then after that followed Hopeville City Council, Imperial City Council, Broad City Council, and Westmoreland, and so on and so on. Because, you know, we believe in the functions of what our forefathers said. The roots of America is implanted in God We Trust. If I make a mistake or criticize something, and so be it, it's my mistake and my error. But I'll tell you what, these people, and I'll have time during other talks when we come up here, these people, I don't have $10,000 to donate to them, let alone $100. I can't afford that. But I'll tell you what, all this is about trying to see Stella and JP, and as far as I'm concerned, me and my family, everybody, I'll do our best to keep them there, and hopefully gain someone else for them can sit there and provide the best, I would say the best curtain, the best protection for our Imperial Valley residents, because if we don't, and we have people like Mr. Benson come up here, we might as well leave the valley and go live in Owens Valley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Anybody else, please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is John Light. I'm a business agent and dispatcher for the Laborers Union, located at 690 Broadway Avenue in El Centro. On behalf of myself and my members, some of which are here in the audience, we're the ones with the bright colors on, we'd like to urge you to approve the licensing of the Centinela power lines, or the Centinela transmission crossing. You know, we have agreements with these contractors, these solar contractors, that this would benefit, and it's going to benefit the community. Basically, we just had a job fair yesterday, and we had over 120 applicants ready to go to work. We can put them to work within 2 or 3 weeks here. I've got members right here in the audience that this will benefit. Basically, local people going to work. That's what it's about. We need the work down here, and we really appreciate your consideration. And please license this and approve whatever we got to do here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Light. Anybody else for public comments, please step to the podium. Okay, thank you. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to comments from the board. I'll start with Mrs. Mendoza.
I'd just like to report that I attended Mike King's retirement dinner celebration this past Friday. He's retiring after 44 years of serving the Imperial Irrigation District. And I'd like to, Mike, are you here in the audience, or did he? Mike, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your service, for your integrity, and for all the good things you've done for the IID. We will miss you. And I hope that in your retirement you find happiness and don't get bored too easily. Anyway, thank you for your service, Mike.
Hey, Mike, why don't you stand up so they can see who you are, okay? Okay. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Okay, Director Desert.
Yes, thank you. Attended the Farm Bureau meeting yesterday. Great presentation from Representative Perez with the state. Expressed concerns about the QSA, about a representation of the IID in Imperial County in regards to the Salton Sea Authority. But what came through the loudest and the clearest was the financial stability of the state, and the question as to whether or not the finances on the commitment from the state regarding the QSA and the Salton Sea are in fact going to be there as we move forward into the future, as we move forward with the current QSA that we have. He has some concerns there. He did not think they were going to be there, and those concerns are shared by many. In addition to that, looking forward to discussion today on action item 11 that Director Hanks has put on the agenda. This regards the committee as a whole. I was kind of quiet on this issue last week, just listening to everybody discuss this, but I'm very supportive of it. But I do have some concerns. And my concerns are specific to recent requests for information that have been submitted to the IID. These requests for information regard emails between the general manager and the board, and phone calls, times, dates, and the amount of time that's spent on the phone on the same. These requests for information come from a past contract employee who is no longer employed at the IID. This employee had oversight of the budget, of the staff, of everything, of our email, our IT system, email security, our phones, and our phone logs. Now that is a problem. Is this request for information, these two requests for information, are they just simply to validate records and documents that this individual has, that this individual is using? I don't know. But I just wanted to make that apparent and open to everybody in the effort of transparency, to the board members here, to Mr. Kelly, and specifically to Mr. Kelly and Mr. Garber and Mr. DeVoy, as they work with this individual answering this request for information. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Desert. Director Hanks.
No comments.
Thank you. I, too, wanted to make a comment. I attended Mr. King's retirement party of 44 years last Friday at the Eucalyptus Schoolhouse, and I want to thank Mike for his service to the IID for 44 years. A very well-attended event, and he had his family there. He has a very nice family. Also, yesterday I did attend the Centinela Solar Energy Facility job fair that was held at the Veterans Hall in Imperial, and it was a very good turnout, very informative. And I'm glad to see that it's all about job creation here in the Valley and keeping families here, raising your children here and your grandchildren here. So it's all a very plus for the Imperial Valley. We need to keep that renewable energy moving to help the people living here in the Valley. Okay, and with that, do you have any comments from the General Manager, Mr. Kelly? Mr. Garber, any comments?
No, sir.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to the consent. Is there approval for the consent?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, please vote. Thank you. We're going to move on to the first informational item, which will be number 4, and that's funding request by the Imperial Valley Regional Occupational Program for Environmental Educational Activities. That's on page 13, and it's Mary Camacho.
Hi, I'm Mary Camacho, Superintendent with Imperial Valley Regional Occupational Program, and I'm here to request $30,000 from IID so that we can continue to run our environmental educational program. Last year, we were really fortunate to get some dollars from you as well, and it was $30,000 that we received last year. And just to report to you what happened a little bit this year, we were able to serve a little over 1,500 students, at least 8 school districts, and we also participated heavily in the Earth Day, and were really instrumental in providing that, along with some other activities. So we'd appreciate your consideration.
Mrs. Camacho?
Yes.
I noticed that you served quite a bit of the school districts, but Brawley wasn't served?
Yes, Brawley was served. Brawley was served.
It's not listed, or?
I believe Brawley High School also participated. If you look on like page 3, they participated in the wetlands planting project and stuff.
Because what school district served 2011, 2012 doesn't list Brawley. So,
Okay, they did participate in one activity, and that was the Alamo Wetlands project.
okay,
So the tree planting. Oh,
would you please come to the mic? And
I'm Genevieve Minville, and they did serve Brawley, because I'm a 4th grade teacher up there, and he had all the 4th graders go to the auditorium, and we studied the wetlands with him. He was really good. So he did come to Brawley.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, Mrs. Camacho would advise you to include Brawley in your list of school districts.
I apologize for that. Calexico, the last count from Calexico was not included in this either, because when we submitted this, we hadn't completed Calexico, so we will make sure we include Brawley. But we tried to hit all the school districts, so we're eager to have us present to them. So
Is your program the only program currently in the Imperial Valley that's dealing with this subject matter?
Yes, it is. And it has been, we've been working with environmental education for at least the last 13 years.
Okay, any questions from the board for Mrs. Camacho? Okay, Mary, we're going to bring this back for action for the
Thank
next
you.
meeting. Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, we're going to move on to number 5, which is Water Department General Matters. Mr. Silva?
On the following program, we have 180,000 acre feet under contract, maybe a little bit more. As far as our overuse this year, we were up to 181,000 on July 3rd. We're down to about 174,000 as of today. So we're hoping to see that number at least stabilize, if not go down more. Also, we have set up a meeting to meet with the USBR in Boulder City on August 1st, and that'd be General Manager, myself, and Tina Shields regarding various issues regarding our water use and paybacks and all those kinds of issues that there's always questions about. We also, last week, met with San Diego County Water Authority to discuss our agreement, where we are with the petition before the State Water Resources Control Board, where they are with their lawsuit with Metropolitan, and just discuss various issues where we are with a conservation program. Tomorrow, we're meeting with Mr. Dumars. We're going to go over his report, any changes that he's made in regard to the public comments, and so we'll see what he has up to date. And that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Silva from the board? Okay, Jesse, thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 6, review of major work authorization to replace the standby generators along the All-American Canal.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Hector Mendez. I'm the supervisor of the Water Department SCADA unit. And we've been working on replacing the emergency standby generators that are installed along the All-American Canal. There are 7 locations and control buildings. And we got approval from the Program Coordinating Committee, comprised of IID and MWD folks, to expand that to the remaining 13 locations on our canal system. So we're asking to go forward with the remaining 13 standby generators. Any questions on that?
Questions from the board for Hector?
What's in the plans for these old generators that are being taken out?
They're in the process of being put up for salvage. So within our normal district policy for salvage, though I understand there's some interest in either purchasing or donation of those. I think that's been brought up to the board before.
And would these units be capable of functioning and working in California, or they don't meet the requirements in California?
I'm not aware of whether they are or not. They are diesel powered. They were installed around 1990 to 1995. They are small, about 10 or 12 kilowatt generators.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Mendoza.
Question. Mr. Mendez, you're going to replace 7 of the 20 generators?
We're in the process of replacing the 7, the initial 7. The PCC first approved us for 7, and when we got a firm quote for the materials and the installation, they asked us to continue with the other 13.
So you're going to do all of them?
Correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other, Director Hanks, you have any questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Hector. We're going to move on to number 7, Energy Department General Matters. Mr. Ivy.
So you may have noticed it's getting a little warm out there. I just want to give a quick report on our demand, our electrical system demand. On June 1st, we actually hit 934 megawatts. Not really sure why, but it just kind of came on us all at once. And since then, we've been trailing around in the 800s. And yesterday, we hit 914, and we're projecting about 963, probably be about 950 in that range today. With the all-time peak being 1,005, we're starting to get close to that level. So a succession of days that are hot like today, and with some humidity coming in, you can bet we'll be real close to what the former peak was. Finally, the Dixieland transformer that we moved to Coachella Valley was placed in service, and everything seems to be functioning normally. So it's a good testament to the teamwork, operations, engineering, and PMO working together to make sure this was installed in a very timely manner. Frankly, it went a lot faster than I thought that it could. But that's a good testament to the people that were working on this project. So it's in service, and the last report I had yesterday was it was working just fine.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Ivy?
Yeah, Mr. Ivy, do we have, with the power usage going up as summer, as it normally does, are we getting any indicators that there's any areas that are problematic that we should be on our radar? Any of the various lines?
Everything is still within specs for what we've known in the past, because we're not getting higher in our peaks. So to the extent that still remains true, we should be in pretty good shape. The addition of that transformer in Coachella Valley gives us more breathing room for making some decisions up there. So we should be in pretty good shape.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, on Path 42, the north end of the valley, we talked about a RAS agreement with Edison a month back or so. Is that still on the horizon, or is that an issue that we need to address, or by placing the transformer, did that mitigate that?
The RAS agreement is going to be coming before the board as an overall presentation, and I'm not sure of the timeline for that, but it should be coming soon to give you a sense of what the RAS is all about. And then it's going to come in conjunction ultimately for approval with reworking the Coachella Valley substation itself to make it more reliable.
And does that include the recent relocation of the transformer we were speaking of earlier?
This is going to be separate and apart from that.
So the transformer issue from Dixie that was relocated has nothing to do with the RAS or that we were talking about?
If I might, that RAS agreement will come back to you in the form of a workshop, and it probably will be in the next several weeks.
And is that on Path 42? Is that the correct location that we're talking about?
It's the Path 42 that was presented to you for information some months ago.
And there's just one RAS we're talking about in the north end of the valley at this time?
Yes.
And the only other RAS information we had was out in the Mount Signal area on the old RAS with San Diego Gas and Electric that was removed.
This is the RAS that much of the focus was on Edison.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for Mr. Ivy?
Mr. Ivy, in the spirit of transparency, what is RAS? Would you explain that, please?
Remedial Action Scheme. It is a specialized protection scheme. SPS is the normal acronym for it these days, that allows us to sense and detect certain outages around the system and then make decisions based on what is left in service and try to take other elements of the system out of service in order to protect the integrity of the system. So it may trip other transmission lines, transformers, or even generators, depending on what the case may be.
Thank you.
It's been very informative the last year learning about some of these terms, specifically these RAS agreements or things that are agreements in between the IID and other electrical agencies neighboring, where financial impacts to upgrade their systems are offset in an agreement that they would control the power that flowed by our system. So and this came up through a recent legal presentation from Mr. Kissinger from Northern California. He brought up the term of robust. Sometimes these RAS agreements have made our electrical balancing authority system at the IID somewhat less robust than they potentially could have been. So as we're moving forward with these solar projects and integrating these other interconnections, we want to make sure that we have the best electrical system that we have, that we're not passing the buck on our ratepayers, our valuable ratepayers, and not deteriorating the integrity of our own system to benefit someone else's. We have to make sure it's a level playing field and fair for all, especially the IID.
Okay, no further questions on the energy general matters. We'll move to item number 8, which is update on the El Centro Unit 3 repower project. And Henrik, you're going to handle that, please.
Good afternoon. Henrik Olstowski, Assistant Manager Generation. Yes, I'm going to provide a brief update on the El Centro Unit 3 repower project and the recovery failure of GTG 32 recovery. Our current status is the construction contractors finishing up on the cleaning up punch list items. Final grading and paving work around the units is being performed. Siemens commissioning staff has been demobilized or is demobilized based on the fact commissioning up to the point that could be accomplished has been accomplished. ARB staff is continuing to demobilize as they complete their work. The Siemens team that's going to remove the failed gas turbine generator showed up on site today, and the damaged turbine core will possibly either be removed Saturday or Monday. The replacement gas turbine core that'll replace the damaged core that's going to be coming out showed up or arrived at the Port of Houston and should be unloaded today onto a truck that'll transport it across the country to El Centro. And that replacement core will possibly be delivered Monday, so we can go ahead and move forward and install it. Just a couple of notes on our on the recovery plan itself. Our near-term focus is to finalize a memorandum of understanding with Siemens to move forward with regards to the failure and finalize an agreement with ARB, the construction contractor, and we want to get that done here within the next days or weeks. And then finally, the commercial operation of El Centro Unit 3 is still scheduled for either late September or early October. And with that, are there any questions?
Any questions for Henrik from the board? Okay, Henrik.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 9, which is to consider a request for public benefits charge donations, and Sabrina Barber's going to handle that.
Good afternoon, President Menville, members of the board. Sabrina Barber, Assistant Manager for the Energy Management and Strategic Marketing section. From time to time, the Energy Department receives requests for funding for projects that are not currently covered under existing public benefits programs, but eligible for funding under the criteria established in California Public Utility Code Section 385. The Energy Department received such a request for donation from Imperial Valley Desert Aquatics for the installation of a solar water heating system at the Hopeville City Pool. This system will allow for extended swim programs for disadvantaged children, as well as a potential water aerobic class for seniors. Approximately $100,000 is budgeted through the annual budget process in the Energy Management and Strategic Marketing section specifically for these type of projects. This request was presented to the ECAC at its June meeting, and the committee recommended a donation amount of $6,528. With me this afternoon is Anastasia Mickey to say a few words on behalf of the project. Also, I'd like to mention if this request is approved, staff also recommends outreach to the other city-owned and operated pools to offer such similar funding. Ms. Mickey?
Thank you, Sabrina. Good afternoon, Mr. President and directors. Thank you so much for considering our request. I'm representing both the Hopeville Athletic Club and Imperial Valley Desert Aquatics. What I've started is a year-round swim club for the south side of the valley. But unfortunately, there is no heating on the south side. The only pool that is heated is Brawley. The city of Brawley pays for a gas heater, which is exorbitant. It's about $5,000 a month. And the city of Hopeville nor the city of El Centro has the funding to do that. So I took it upon myself to raise the money for solar. And the city has allowed us to use their pool and install the solar at the Hopeville pool. With the motion that was made by Mr. Abadi, that would complete our funding for 80% coverage of solar on the pool, which will enable us to swim 10 months a year. I have to tell you the difference that this club's made already. I've seen, if any of you have children that are swimmers, the swimmers that have been swimming with this club for the past 2 months since the water has been warm enough have already taken 10 to 30 seconds off their times. They've gone from a minute 5, down to in the 30 to 40 second range. So what my dream was to enable those kids that aren't softball players or football players to have an opportunity at an athletic scholarship. And indeed, I can see already out of the 20 swimmers that we have, at least 2 scholarships that will be achieved by these children, which will enable them to go to college because they're all from low-income families. Did you have any questions?
Any questions?
No, I'd just like to make a comment. You know, if we help the casino, surely we can help Hopeville.
So that's most generous, and the children of the Imperial Valley do appreciate that.
Okay, very good. Appreciate your
Very much.
presentation. and
Thank you for
for
your
coming.
consideration.
Thank you, Sabrina. All right, we'll move on to item number 10, which is the review of the district's Revenue Protection Program Awareness Campaign.
Michael
Go ahead,
Beltran,
Mike.
Security and Claims Investigations, now running the Revenue Protection Program for the district. Good afternoon to the board and to the GM. Before I start on this PowerPoint real quick, I won't take a whole lot of your time, but I just a brief background on what we're trying to do here. Revenue protection within our industry is based on meter tampering and energy diversion cases. And it's become a major problem here in the United States as well as in our service area in La Quinta and in the Imperial Valley. During the last couple of decades, we have been investigating and following through these incidents, but now we have actually formulated a written SOP and procedures in order to go out there and give us some more tools to use and bring an awareness to not only the employees but to the public as well. The objective of this program is to recover losses monetarily associated with theft and non-theft issues related to meter tampering and theft. It's also to deter or eradicate the problems we have with the tampering, where it may be a problem to the public, a hazard to our line personnel or employees. So this is part of the main reason we're putting this together right now.
Mr. Beltran?
Yes, ma'am.
If you find that someone has been tampering with the meter, and do you notify the police authorities or the sheriff's department?
We do in cases where we're able to prove that there's criminal intent, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're getting more involved in that. And we're trying to, part of this program now is we're acting on every single incident and case we have. We're trying to take it civil and criminally. And we're following it through from the discovery time all the way through until it's there's the disposition on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And you can see how this is a major problem across the United States. It's 2 to 4% of the annual energy sales. It's totaling about $6 billion. That's the 2011 stats. In our revenue protection unit, we actually put it together so we can work on prevention and detection, and then also on the actions we're going to take. We actually have a written policy on how we're to handle these. So it's done the same here in La Quinta and the Imperial Valley service areas. And then it will be under the Imperial Irrigation Security Claims Investigation Unit that does follow through with these. And just a real quick some stats. I didn't want to bore everyone with stats, but in 2010, we had approximately 259 reported diversions and meter tamperings. In 2011, we had 248, and those are only what's being reported. And now that we have this awareness going out with the public and also with the employees, like I said, we know that this is going to increase. We have several tools that we've added to this that we haven't had in the past. And the main benefits here are basically ensuring the safety of the public and the line crew, the meter readers, the troubleshooters when they're out there. It's recovering lost revenues, which, like I said, we are going to take civilly, and we do have fees that are charged when somebody does tamper it as well. And then it's just to protect the vulnerability of our power grid. And then what we're doing is we've already had 20 sessions with the employees. We've had 20 presentations on meter tampering and diversions, on what to look for and reporting policies we have. And we're also going to have we're launching a public awareness with the general public, and that's why we're bringing it before the board. We'll be putting flyers out. We'll be doing local media outlets, more employee presentations, websites, newsletters. And like I said, we want this to go across both service areas. And so the general public, we're hoping if it's somebody that's actually maybe thinking about doing it, well, they'll know about the dangers and that there are consequences. But then we'll also hopefully get some of the public helping and reporting these as well. And the detection, again, is it's going to be with our people out in the field, our field personnel, everyone from the meter readers to the service reps to the line crews that'll see this out there. And then we're hoping to get information from the public as well as law enforcement. They're on board as well with us. We have a real good relationship with Imperial Valley law enforcement. And then we're going to also have our new tools. What we're going to use is we have no outside help needed. It's all inside IT and our GIS unit. We're putting together 4 SAP reporting queries right now, and it'll show transactions that we can end up feeding it information into our systems application program we have, our internal program, and it will give us what we're looking for. And what it does, it shows us anomalies within our system on who may be committing power theft. And the action taken, we're going to treat everything like I said that we're going to actually go to court criminally or civilly. So we're documenting everything. We have new forms out that it's going to be district wide. We're using, and then we're hoping that again, one of our main reasons besides the revenue recovery is for the protection of the public and employees. So we're hoping that this program will really do that. And we're going to start keeping tabs on every single incident. And so we'll have reporting done on a monthly, quarterly, and yearly basis. And this is just a couple of samples that are going out for this awareness campaign.
Okay. Do you have any idea how much revenue has been lost for the Imperial Irrigation District in, say, 2011?
Yeah, for 2010, it was approximately $124,000, and that's all we had that we recovered from the tampering fees. Now we did recover monies due to the back billing on the thefts themselves, so that's what we were able to recover. That we have documented. Now we're tracking every single incident. We're going to show back billing. So like I said, every month and every quarter, we'll have a report that'll show the exact recovery, whether it's for the tampering fees, for our personnel going out there for IID damaged property, as well as the back billing for the energy that has been stolen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mike, you mentioned a number of 4% nationwide. Is that correct? Is that the number you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, it's between 2 and 4, maybe as high as 6 is the gross revenue. Yes.
And do you feel that the IID falls within those percentages?
We've never tracked it. Like I said, we have responded to these. We can go back and see the numbers we have, but the back billing it'd be an enormous amount of work to do.
Right.
But now that we're going forward, that's basically what's happening in every entity. That's the average right now. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't think we'd be any different.
And these losses, these theft losses, are they combined into what we call line loss, or is it kept separate from line loss?
No, that's kept separate.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike. Is that it on the presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any further questions, Dr. Hanks?
Yes. I'd like to see, Mr. Kelly, I'd like to see this program expanded. We're talking here about meters, and the number that was mentioned that was recovered, which is minuscule to the questions that were asked. I've tracked this for about 6 years now. This past year, our line losses that was given to me from Energy just recently was 7.8%. Now, line losses is separate from what we're talking about here. Line losses is because of heat and distance, maybe design, transformers, and so forth. But if you look at the amount of megawatts produced and what we sold and collected on is 12.3%. Now, if you subtract that from the 7.8% line loss, you get a 4.5% that's unaccounted for. Now, it may not be just meter loss, and that's why I'm asking about expanding this type service and additional training. It may be a disconnect between our meter reading and our billing. It may be theft. It may be a number of items, okay? We don't know. But when you're talking about 4.5 or 5% of a $400 million energy budget, you're talking between $16 and $20 million. And this has been ongoing. I brought it up. Prior energy managers said that they would bring in professionals to take a look at it. And there's ways to measure this. I was informed the other day, I forgot the term Kirchhoff law or something, where you can measure the meter that's going through a junction coming in and what's coming out. When we're talking yearly losses along this line, it would pay us to do a very thorough analysis of our system and see where this energy is going.
Yeah, Director Hanks, let me expand on that, some of the process that we're using on this. Some of the SAP queries or the transactions that we'll receive out of our internal system, we're feeding them the information that we need as investigating these type of incidents. What those will do is we will go to those locations, and if it's not theft, then that's when it may be an equipment issue as well. And so that's when we'll be able to start tracking whether it was a faulty equipment, whether it's theft or a clerical error down the line. So this is something that, like I said, it should really benefit in a bunch of different avenues for us.
Well, I know the Energy Department reported today on moving some transformers. I think that's going to help quite a bit in our line losses and so forth. But it's a very significant number that needs to be searched out.
I do want to acknowledge that Mr. Beltran's been trying valiantly to get this in front of the board and onto the agenda for several meetings in a row, and Gloria's kept it off. But I do intend to get with security and claims and make this a larger program than is even contemplated.
Hopeville needs the money.
Clearly.
Okay, is there any further questions for Mr. Beltran? Okay, Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We're going to move into the action items, and the first one is number 11. It's schedule a public workshop to gather input on Director Hanks' Committee of the Whole proposal. That's on page 59. And Director Hanks, you going to take this, or Mr. Kelly?
No, this is in response to this item coming to the board at its last meeting as an informational item. At that time, my office responded that we'd come back with further research. We do need additional time to give this matter the attention it deserves. And so what I would like to ask of the board is that we set a public workshop for 2 weeks from now on July 24th. And I've asked legal staff to do some research of similarly situated utilities, find out how they, the protocols that they have in place, and we will move forward at that time and invite public input.
Mr. Kelly, what time on the 24th? Do you have that yet?
I would expect we would tack it on to the end of
our
your
board
regular meeting.
Okay, is there, Director Hanks, you have any comments before somebody makes a motion to move this forward?
No comments.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, please vote. All right, thank you. We're going to move on to item number 12, which is authorization for the general manager and general counsel to execute the Centinela Transmission Crossing License Agreement and pertinent documents. That's on page 60. Mr. Kelly, you're going to handle that, or Mr. Garber?
I'll handle
Mr.
that.
Garber.
Yeah, I would like to say something. The board and the audience, I've recused myself on this subject in the past as it involves a project that involves property that I'm associated with. This is the second or third or even the fourth time that this project has come back before us. And these solar projects have not been individualized where we can handle them on a one-on-one basis. They're coming back to us in a cluster of some 800 megawatts. So for those reasons, I'll be stepping away from the board in participation for items 12, 13, and 14 today.
All right, thank you, Director Desert.
Jeff Garber, General Counsel, board members. This is the transmission crossing license agreement for the Centinela project. A copy of the agreement should be available in front of you. The agreement is actually only about 30 pages long, but it attaches a number of exhibits as well as another agreement involving Centinela, what's known as an LGIA, which is the agreement with San Diego Gas and Electric and the CalISO. I do see John King and Eric Crawford, and maybe there's some others from Centinela here in the audience, and I'm sure they're going to want a chance to speak as well. But this agreement is fairly well summarized in the board agenda memo. I did, the one that says number 1, see the one there? That's a representation of the size of the project, where it's located out on the southwest corner of the valley by the West Side Main. And as you'll recall, when you approved the agreements with regard to the Sea Solar projects, as part of the Sea Solar project, IID is going to construct a short 230 kV line in a north-south direction. The north part of that line would connect to the Drew substation, which is being constructed by this project, and then energy would be transmitted from Drew west over the West Side Main, through other lands, and eventually to the IV substation. And if you, Joanne, if you look at number 2.
Jeff, you need to be talking into that mic.
Yes, sir, I apologize. Number 2 should be a drawing of that transmission path. Centinela is going to build approximately 175 megawatt plant, although there are some potential, there's a potential that that plant may be enlarged somewhat. Again, as I described, and I thought it was 175. It says 170 on here, but I believe it's 175. Is that correct, Mr. King?
The delivered energy is 170.
Okay. As is shown in this drawing, which shows the transmission path, you see the Drew sub. There's a 230 line going east-west from the Drew sub, and then it crosses the West Side Main Canal and then continues on a westerly direction. This agreement primarily addresses the crossing right to cross over the West Side Main Canal. It's a form of an encroachment right. And basically what's being given to Centinela and be given to Centinela to assign to San Diego Gas and Electric is a 30-year right to cross the canal with a construction line and transmit up to 800 megawatts of energy across that line. It is anticipated that other geothermal or other solar projects will be connecting at the Drew substation. And so it's not only Centinela's energy, but it's the energy from Sea Solar and some other projects that will be combined to reach that 800 megawatt limit. There are 2 forms of encroachments that are being granted under this license. One is a construction encroachment that allows Centinela to build the crossing. The only thing that's going to be located on IID ground with regard to the crossing is the overhead lines. The towers will be outside the boundaries of IID property. Then there's a second encroachment permit that's being issued, which allows the maintenance and operation of that crossing. After the 230 line, the Drew substation, and the crossing are constructed, it's anticipated that Centinela will assign those items to San Diego Gas and Electric, and they will then become an assignee under this agreement, which is recognized, and they will operate under that license for 30 years. As part of this project, Centinela is planning to enter into an encroachment agreement. We used to do fairly simple encroachment permits. Because of these large solar projects that we're now involved in, the real estate, water, and energy departments are using a long-form agreement that the legal department drafted. And I've laid out on page 62 of your agenda package, the fees that have been paid by Centinela with regard to the work on that encroachment agreement. There are also mitigation fees that are being paid. There's an upfront one-time fee of about $300,000, and then there are annual fees every year that total more than $4.5 million for the life of the project. In addition, these various other fees have been paid or will be paid as part of the process of obtaining the encroachment contract. The encroachment contract will be issued by staff once the board authorizes this crossing agreement. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Garber from the board?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Garber. Do you have the dollar amount for the affected system agreement for Centinela Solar?
Yes, I do, but I don't want to steal someone else's thunder. That item is coming up next, and I believe the dollar amount is probably going to be what is going to be required as the amount of security that would be posted for purposes of affected system impacts will be about $15.6 million in total. We don't really know what it's going to actually cost until we build the affected system mitigation. And so typically what we do is we enter into an agreement with the party. We have them put up a letter of credit or other security for the amount of the total potential amount. And when we actually build the mitigation that's required to deal with the impacts, then we'll, if that mitigation is completed for less, we may release the rest of that security. But I believe,
and if it's built, and if the impacts are more?
At this point, we are working on finding a total cap for that. Again, I feel a little awkward because this is another agenda item, and I know Ms. Asbury is going to come up here and talk about it. But right now, we are working with staff and with Mr. Kelly to determine if we can cap the impacts at a total not to exceed value for the worst case scenario. We can get a letter of credit put up for that amount and move forward. As Ms. Asbury will tell you, determining affected system impacts for projects that are impacting us that are outside our balancing authority and not utilizing our transmission system is somewhat unique and different than analyzing impacts that are inside connecting to our system. So, but that issue is going to be addressed in length. I think that's either the next agenda item or the one after that.
Next one.
So going back to the TCLA then.
Yeah, is there any?
Yeah, Mr. Kelly, I know that these are separate items, but I really object to how this has progressed. I've been very vocal about it, about being piecemeal, and this is another indication. We're taking this piece by piece, step by step, kicking the can down the road. And there is a major issue here that this board is responsible, which is to protect our ratepayers. Now, I believe a deal can be had, but there's some unanswered questions that need to be resolved. And part of it, the biggest part of it, is the affected study portion. And we have this transmission part moving first. Then we move to the affected studies. I don't know quite how you handle this, but even going to school in the north end, we learn how to count to 3. Okay, and there's 3 of us up here, and if a deal's to be had, I need some answers. I need some answers up front, ahead of time, not after the fact, not kicking the can down the road.
Well, the reason that it's agendized in this way is this item came to you as information. At that time, the contract or agreement based on the affected system study, I believed that it would be captured in written form and you would have it in front of you. That wasn't possible. At the time, the parties were in dispute about this capped figure that Mr. Garber referred to before. That isn't the case now. The problem today, as I understand it, is that one project, depending on the order in which it is, it comes in the Cal ISO queue, could trigger all of the impacts on an affected system like ours. And I believe that what the board supports in concept is a proportionate share where each project stands alone and pays its own way. There are other projects that would connect to Drew. Centinela has waited until this point patiently for us to agendize it and bring it to your board. If what you are saying is that you cannot proceed without an affected system study in front of you, then I take that on my own, because I had warranted to not only Centinela but to others that I would not miss the date of July 10th.
Yeah. Well, the bottom line is we're cleaning up a matter that is very important to everybody in Imperial Valley. It's very important to these developers that have timelines and money invested. It may not at all phases of the project be beneficial to the IID, or maybe it hasn't been optimized to the benefit of the IID, and I understand that. And I've wrestled with that all through these documents, and trying to find a comfort zone where the IID stands down because it benefits the whole valley. But at the same time, we have some ratepayers out there that cannot stand down. I mean, they're hitting the limit. We know who they are. We hear from them all the time. And it's very bothering to me, and I'm not placing the blame on these developers. They have a project, and their job is to get the project through. What I am complaining about is the fact that this hasn't had thorough options discussed with the board, or opportunities to make it work so that these development goes forward, and not without a lot of major changes or costs, and at the same time, these projects aren't going forward based on some of our ratepayers that can't afford to take the hit. Now let me support what I'm saying. We had projects that were hooking into the IID grid that we discussed, and we talked about ways that we were going to build out a robust transmission system so that the projects could move forward. The ratepayers didn't take a big hit. We were told, as the whole board, that the projects had PPAs. And I'm talking about PAF 42 now. I'm not talking about these projects. And at the end of the day, there was no PPA. There was a PPA with Energy Source going to Arizona. We moved forward. When I say we, I'm talking about ratepayers and all of us. We moved forward with the Midway to Bannister line. We built it out based on the information that we'd received, that there was projects with PPAs. Energy Source put their money up, and we moved forward with the project at a risk, a known risk, calculated risk, based on the information we received. Wrong information, intentionally stayed so. So we have midway to Bannister Belt, we have one project on it. And in all the projects that's being considered, not just this crossing, there is one project still alive in that area with 150 megawatts, and some of it would be hooking into the PAT 42. Some of it, is my understanding, will have impacts on the system that we're talking about with these affected studies. My desire is to see all these projects go through, not just one at a time until we reach a point where maybe we mess something or we lowball something, and now we're playing catch up down the road. Because basically that's what we did with Sea Solar. Keep their project going. The effective study that came to us said $2.5 million. And in fairness to Sea Solar, they said, look, we need to keep this project moving. We need it to move forward. We will agree up to $7.5 million. Okay? In the meantime, the affected studies that came to us had Sea Solar at 2.5. I think the one with LS was 1.2 million. There was 800,000 and I think a 400,000, one of them in Arizona. And it's very important everybody understands when projects go in, they may not be in the Imperial Valley that affect the area we're talking about around the Imperial Valley sub. There was some concern by the board about those numbers, okay? And those numbers were based on the RAS agreements that Director Mendoza mentioned a while ago for clarification, which is an operational process by which we protect our system manually, not infrastructure. Okay, we know we had a blackout. We know we have a problem there. These were some agreements that were put into place 20 years ago. And in these agreements, whenever our system is being impacted or overloaded, a RAS agreement is basically, we call the generator and say, hey, you're hitting us hard, you got to back off. You're going to burn our lines, blow a fuse, and so forth. That worked quite well 20 years ago. But with all the regulatory issues and fines, and the Lord knows, you know, we're aware of fines. That has become even a bigger issue. Now, when we're talking about moving forward, okay, we want these projects to move forward. We want these jobs here and the benefits they bring. At the same time, I want to make sure that the people that we represent are being protected. Now, in this RAS agreement that we did away with, okay, and because it was just operational, we need to look at infrastructure. The group that was responsible for that RAS agreement are generators, mostly generators in Mexico, U.S.-owned generators. They have an impact on that system. They have an obligation to cover those impacts up to that level before these developers come online. So when we're looking at this, okay, we moved from a affected study total of about 4 million to now 46 million. Okay, that's huge. If we move one project at a time, and LS agrees, hey, we're not going to fight that. That's 15.7 million, which is a large number, quite a difference between 1.2 million that they're going to have to cough up. But what if that's the last project? And the impacts in that area are going to be greater. Our ratepayers can't afford to get stuck. They're already paying for the shortfall at PAT 42. So what I'm saying is we have to move at a pace where this is all synchronized And I'm not crazy about the PTO and so forth, but there was a vote on that, and there was a 3-2 vote move forward with the MOU. Okay, I think there's a difference in the MOU and what we have here, but we'll deal with that in a second. But I would like to see a holistic approach. What is the total impacts from all of the projects that have PPAs that are coming into the system so that we know what that cost is? If one falls out, okay, the rest are going to have to pick it up. If more comes in, there might be a credit. Okay, so I'm looking at a holistic approach. These numbers should have come here. What Mr. Garber was talking about a while ago, how we work it, that's within our own system. That's within our own grid, in our own queue. None of these are in our queue. None of these people, except for one project north, asked to be considered in our queue. So we're totally dependent upon this information. Now, in fairness to these developers, that process started about 18 months ago. We got the information when we voted on the first crossing with Sea Solar. Okay? So, you know, it's not like the developers haven't been talking to personnel, but those of us that have to make the decision have not been given the total picture. Now, I know that you were concerned. I know that you called for another study, and I believe Mrs. Ashbury and Mr. Barrientos has headed that up. And that's where this figure, 46 million, is coming up, okay? That makes me very nervous now. What risks are we taking? I want to see the full picture, okay? Then I'll get back to another issue on the crossing. But how do we consider that? And I think, I'm not sure, but that might be where Director Mendoza was going to go, wanting to know what these numbers were.
Yeah, I think
because we need to know.
I think you're referring to a cluster.
Yes.
And I do think that Ms. Asbury is actually going to address that.
We can continue this item and move forward to her item because that seems to be an interrelated item that you want to talk about. You can always go back to this item.
I don't think that there's any way around these projects appearing before you in sequence chronologically. The total impact, the universe of 46 million or
well, that's how it was
million.
studied. It was studied in some form like that.
It's actually been a challenge for them because the base case is supplied by Cal ISO, and there's been some real spade work that's had to go on in the last couple of weeks. But if with the board's indulgence, can we bring Ms. Asbury up to address
Sure.
the?
Yes.
Good afternoon, directors. I understand your concerns, and I think in large measure the reason there's a separation is because what Mr. Garber and Mr. Kelly are working on are separately negotiated agreements, and affected system studies really fall within the purview of IID's open access transmission tariff. The tariff sort of governs and gives very skeletal instructions to transmission providers and affected systems about their obligations in terms of sharing and cooperating with one another. IID did conduct studies based on base case data we received from the Cal ISO, and they are, in cluster 5 now. So they have serial projects, they're transitional clusters 1 and 2, 3 and 4. They're significantly larger. Their interconnection requests are significantly more expansive than those that IID receives in its own interconnection process. Well, when we conducted the initial studies, we looked at everything, and it wasn't necessarily certain generators that came to us that followed the rules and came to us for an affected system study that were potentially driving the need for these upgrades. It was higher queued projects that are still in the ISO base case that have signed an interconnection agreement and potentially are the cause, or at least are the major cause of the drivers for the need for these upgrades. Centinela just happens to be here, and it's a perfect storm of circumstances that surround them coming to the IID for their study. The outage occurred, the FERC report came out. There are a lot of things that we're trying to do to minimize and allow viable projects to move forward, even those outside of the IID system. And the upgrades that were identified, we received a base case from the ISO that wasn't necessarily usual. It came to us with overloads reflected on the IID system. As we sit here today, there are no overloads on this system. The system operates perfectly fine. But when you start simulating injection of energy from those projects, then you start seeing overloads. Their project is making worse what is in the base case an existing condition. They're contributing to it. They're not the entire driver for the problem. If we take a creative approach and sort of look at how we do their study, and we restudied and included those higher Q generators, the cost of the mitigations for the impacts is the larger $40 million number that you're seeing. Their proportional share of that, how the percentage they're exacerbating those overloads, is the 15 or the 14.2 million. 1 million of that is system operating procedures, which are a little bit different than a system, an SPS or a RAS, because they're IID's own. They're processes IID can call upon to curtail generation. We're going to have to coordinate those with the ISO and with SDG&E, but those are operating procedures that are within the purview of IID's control. We recognize that Sentinel clearly has some concerns about being potentially exposed to a $40 million upgrade for a 170 megawatt project not interconnecting to our system. If those higher queued projects were not in the ISO base case, we might be able, the impacts may be less. They may be significantly less. Unfortunately, we received updated base case data from the ISO, and the majority of those projects remain. We have contacted those developers. We've told them what their obligations are. There's no guarantee they're going to come to the IID for a study, but in the event they do, they will pay. I've been working with system planning because we're trying to be, as you said, we're trying to think outside the box, but work within the framework of our tariff. We want to protect the reliability of the grid, and we certainly want to protect our own ratepayers. What we are proposing, and we're trying to firm it up from an engineering perspective before we figure out how to do it from a legal perspective, working within the framework of our tariff, is to cluster these projects. The sort of challenge with clustering them is that they were not all studied in the same windows within the ISO process. So the study assumptions and methodologies might have been different for each one of them. I think we need to develop a base case that is validated by the ISO and SDG&E, and then IID will cheerfully aggregate those generators, injecting energy into the IID system. I think system planning would like to utilize a methodology by which it's one large generator. These are the impacts that are identified on the IID system, and then assess a per megawatt value. That would be much easier. It's a cleaner system. IID could then allocate costs as those developers come along up to a certain megawatt threshold. I think we want to be certain that's going to work from a perspective of the engineering appropriateness of it, for lack of a better word, and I want to make certain that we can have validation from the ISO and from SDG&E, because ultimately it's their base case data that drove this issue. So I hope that answers, or at least gives you a little background.
Yeah, well, what it does, it shores up my concern that the way the study designs, because it's outside our cluster and so forth, there are some variables that we don't have control of it.
Correct.
Okay. And in anticipation of that, okay, I know my vote's going to be important. And I have a manner in which to deal with that, that if you want to deal today, then it needs to move in this direction, because I got to have that protection for our ratepayers.
I'd be interested to hear about that.
All right, this is what I'm proposing. Sometimes I can't believe I'm saying this, but here we go. Imperial Irrigation District assessment to become a partial participant transmission owner with the California Independent System Operator for the following new facilities. Now, this is pretty consistent with the MOU that was passed. New facilities are defined as the new 230 kV lines connecting the new 230 kV Drew substation to the existing 230 kV Imperial Valley substation. That is still consistent with the MOU. That doesn't change anything.
Those are IID lines?
Okay.
No, it's
The
not
cost of the gen tie from the generator to the Drew substation is the responsibility of the generator. IID will construct and own these new facilities. CalISO will operate these facilities, as these facilities will be placed under CalISO Balancing Authority. That is still consistent with the PPTO.
I think so.
Well, no,
Yes.
CalISO
Let
is
him
only going to
finish.
have Drew.
All future interconnections, planning, ratings, and maintenance of these new facilities will be the responsibility of IID as a PPTO, which is pretty much our similar arrangement, okay? Any generators interconnecting to the Drew substation will pay for the cost of the new facilities and will be reimbursed from CalISO in 5 years. That's their standard tariff language for PPTOs. In addition, generators interconnecting to the new facilities will pay IID for the affected system costs capped at the amount equal to payment under the IID wheeling fee. We reduced the IID wheeling fee 67% to make the projects competitive in Imperial Valley. And I think if you ask Mr. Broking, he will tell you that is bare bone, even if it meets bare bone. I think he's been relieved there's only been one project maybe hooked up to that. So I'm talking about bare bone protection for the IID ratepayer. So if that fee comes out to $18 million for LS, and the effective study comes out to 15, that's all they're going to pay. Okay? Now, the generators will be operating under CalISO Balancing Authority, consistent with the MOU. Therefore, there would be no IID Balance Authority charges. And that was the pancaking that they were concerned with. All right. I was raised in making a deal, particularly with family members, in a give or take situation to make sure it was fair so that you didn't end up with family squabbles. So whatever you offered, you would also be willing to take that in return. Okay? So what I'm saying here, if this isn't considered fair, then this is the counter. If CalISO does not approve the PPTO, because there's a lot of doubt amongst this board whether they're playing square up with us, the new facilities will be under the IID Balancing Authority. Generators will pay for the cost of the network upgrades, new facilities, and affected system costs. Generators will receive a transmission wheeling credit over the life of the project. That scares you, huh? Of our reduced economic rate. In addition, generators will pay the IID Balancing Authority charges. That's what we're offering to people inside. This is what they're bringing to us, in a situation that says, we're out of time, you have to do this, or you're going to kill our project. No, we're not killing your project. These are the options. And this will assure us, okay, that when these projects come forward, those affected costs are studied up to the cap. If it goes over the cap, they would have preferred to hook to the IID anyway. And that was the whole purpose of bypassing to start with, was the savings. This has it built in. And then I've got something that's really bothered me. And I've debated, and as my grandson said, you better talk to God before you say this. I'm very concerned that I'm hearing that there's challenges to a lot of projects, okay, and keeping with the understanding that these developers, their job is to get these projects through. And there's settlements being made out there, dependent upon my vote today. And I want to make sure that none of that settlement is used to kill other projects, particularly those hooking into the IID or those that may have other projects in the IID. That is a great concern of mine. The settlement, you know, is what they have to do for whatever business reasons, but I'm telling you, the action to stop these, if it's for pay, if it's for payment, bothers me greatly. And if that's going on, there's some people that I had high esteem for are sure going to go down in my view. And so that is the reason, one of the reasons. And I've talked to LS, I've talked to San Diego Gas and Electric. They know what my concerns are on that issue. And I don't want to see us give people breaks on the backs of our ratepayers, then use that, turn around and hammer us on the other side that benefits our ratepayers.
You're saying that the proceeds from the settlement on this project ought not be used to thwart the one PPA that's in the IID queue.
Well, that one, or if somebody else is
right,
has joined,
right,
maybe in the bypass and maybe in the IID.
Right.
You know, if that's used to fight projects outside of our balancing area, that's their problem.
Right.
They're using their own money against them. But I feel very strongly about issuing my vote. First, everybody knows where I feel along this. I voted against the MOU. Okay, I'm not here to destroy that MOU. It passed 3-2. I'm trying to honor that, but at the same time, I want this protection in here. Because what this does, this allows the projects to go forward. It allows it to go forward at basically the same costs that would be otherwise. But it gives the ID protection, and more importantly, it gives the ratepayer the protection that we may not have optimized our assets, okay, but we have some closure here. We have some carve out for future protection. I am very concerned, as along with my colleagues, that we do not enter into contracts or enter into a situation that we become part of CalISO. Our ratepayers cannot afford their rates. Our business cannot afford their rates.
If I might, I can understand and appreciate what you've tried to do with that. I'll have to review Ms. Rivera's notes as to how she captured it. I do want to stipulate that Drew, unlike the crossing to the north that we haven't gotten to, does not qualify as network upgradable because we do not connect to it at present. Is that right, Mr. Ivey?
That's correct. It's under the ISO policies in play right now. It would be considered as a gen tie because the only people that are using it are the generation facilities. The line that it's going to be tying into will essentially be a dead end coming out of the IV sub. Now, it could become a network facility at some point in the time in the future when we do loop some of our lines or SDG&E's lines into it.
It is contemplated as a network contingent on a couple of other interconnections. In the meantime, the way that was supposed to be mitigated for was through a definitive MOU with San Diego that even if there were not a PPTO, IID would have standing. Those facilities that you mentioned with IID retaining some interest, was there anything in that struck you as particularly problematic?
Yes, as I understand it, the agreements that are already in place between Sentinel, San Diego, and CalISO provide that those facilities are going to be given to San Diego, and they're going to be considered San Diego facilities. So I don't know how we would address that.
But you didn't say IID was part of that agreement.
IID is not part of the agreement.
I represent IID.
I hear you, but I was asked a question. I'm just telling you, my understanding is that's the arrangement.
So the PPTO, the general schedule we've been following calls for CalISO to make a determination in the fall, November or December, and the status of Drew, as I'd like, if I could, Director Hanks, to concentrate on the equivalency of wheeling revenue versus a cap, an absolute cap on system impacts. What Ms. Asbury and others have been wrestling with has been this universe caused by this cluster, a cluster that is I think, admittedly bigger than is realistic, because there are phantom projects in the ISO cluster. Isn't it likely that some
I
of
think that not every interconnection request is a valid interconnection request.
But erring on the side of caution, we have settled on $46 million, right?
For the projects we've studied to date and the higher queued projects that were until this last week unidentified, yes.
And that's the problem, because that changes.
That's correct.
And that's what I'm saying, because it changes. We don't know who the players are. And you know what? LS might agree to 15.7, but under our system, it could have gone up to the full 46 if everybody dropped out, and it wouldn't work for them. So what I'm proposing, it gives them protection too, but at the same time, it gives us protection.
The IID system, Director Hanks, we have a little more latitude because it is our system and we really know who the developers are. And if they're gone, they're gone. And we know they're gone because we've made certain of it. We have a valid base case to move forward with. What we can't do is make assumptions with respect to what is and is not valid in the ISO process. And sort of that's our issue. That's what we struggle with.
And that is their fault, because they didn't come and ask us to start with to be in our queue. That's not our issue. They chose elsewhere because it was a savings. It might have been a requirement of the other utility. But that doesn't diminish the risk that we put our ratepayers in if we don't have some type of stopgap. And in the case of LS, I think the maximum that they would pay under the scenario that I presented would have been $18 million. So with this, they're risking $3 million. Okay? Only $3 million. Without it, they may be risking another $15 million. It's a fair proposal. It doesn't take away anything. And so it's a fair. Take it. If you can't take it, I'll buy it with my other side. Take which one you want. But leave me the same option.
Would it be helpful, Director Hanks, if staff sort of did a very quick analysis based on the criteria that we are sort of attempting to firm up, and what those costs would be for generators who just, if we did it based on IID's alternative rate structure?
You know, we've got other projects in the vicinity that's not part of this crossing.
Right.
You know, we got the Northern Collector. We need to know how that's going to impact too. That's a whole another situation. And, you know, in the MOU, non-binding, there's a provision in there, if Cali doesn't agree to it, we're just out and they move on, okay? These projects can move forward. Give them the same proposal. Give them a non-binding conditional use of that crossing. See if they want to gamble the same way we're being asked to gamble. The project moves on, but that gives time to study this, gives them time to look at this and see, is this acceptable? But the very things that you're talking about and trying to determine what are the effects here, this gives some safeguard both sides. We're not going to get hammered. They're not going to get hammered. And the more projects that come in, that's in their queue, the more they bring in, the better it's going to serve them. I'm very worried that with all these outside concerted activities going on, all of a sudden people say, this doesn't work for me, I'm out of here. Now the IID ratepayers are stuck.
Under your scenario, Director Hanks, does that cap provide for reimbursement as other projects come in proportionately?
Yes.
Based on a cluster?
Absolutely.
So there would be a restudy as we are proposing.
As they come in, they may get some money returned back to them.
But at this point, the purpose of my presentation today was basically to solicit from the board authorization to move forward with Mr. Kelly executing agreement based on certain principles, and one of them was a determination of what that cap was going to be. And then, you know, we did agree we committed essentially to them. We agreed to address with the board the option of reimbursing them later on should other developers come along who drove the need for the same upgrades, and ask that they pay their fair and proportional share as well. So that was.
But we ask, if we know who's in, we ask for them to pay up front. You have an idea what that is. It may, because of the cap, it may go up and it may go down. And we'll reimburse them. That's nothing more than what we ask for people that come into our grid.
That's part of the agreement. It's always been part of the agreement. I think Centinela knows that if they put up $5.5 million, it doesn't cost that, they get their money back. We did the same thing with Tenaska. They put up, their study was 2.6, they put up 7.5 over a 3-year period. If it doesn't get to that, they get their money back.
Typically what they do is they provide a letter of credit, which guarantees the payment. When it's time to build the upgrades, we ask them to make the payment. They make the payment, and we reduce the letter of credit. When the upgrades are complete, if there's money remaining on the letter of credit and we believe they're complete, we can agree to release the letter of credit. That's typically how it would work.
In this situation, because system operating procedures are required and we need to ramp up rather rapidly, we would require that $1 million be posted in cash and the remainder in a letter of credit, whatever that.
Yeah, and I think they're
because we need
here
that to
today.
do the
I think they're willing to
SOPs.
do that.
You know, I'd like to hear some comment from them, whether they think it's a fair proposal or not.
John, Mr. King, you want to come to the podium?
Mr. President, Director Hanks, Director Mendoza. A lot of discussion. So
say who you represent for the record.
John King with LS Power, and we're the owner of Centinela Solar Energy. And we have been developing Centinela for a little over 3 years. We've been engaged with Imperial Irrigation District for approximately 2 years in real estate matters and the affected system study, which we started that process about 18 months ago. I think you heard that we were one of the generators. We did come forward, started the process. I think we were the first affected system study request you received. We've been working with your management and staff for 2 years, and I think we've reached some very fair agreements on the transmission crossing license agreement and the encroachment agreement that protects the IID and your facilities and allows our project to move forward. On the affected system agreement, the initial study, as you referenced, was $1.2 million and no need for network upgrades. And that was without all these other projects in the study. There were no need for network upgrades. You know, it was, and on the restudy where all the projects were put in, and as Ms. Hasbury mentioned, in that scenario, the overloads were then pre-existing before our project was modeled, and then it was how much did our project exacerbate those existing overloads, and that's how the $14.5 million number was calculated as what would be our share if ultimately, you know, it was decided that these network upgrades, all the projects showed up and they had to be built, and what could be our maximum liability in that scenario. So I think in the case where, you know, the other projects don't show up, they're, you know, the network upgrades, the system's not currently overloaded. So it's not automatically you need to get all the upgrades funded by Centinela. In truth, the upgrades won't be needed. And now there's a lot of, I'm not an engineer, and there's a lot of engineering studies, but you know, what we are prepared to do, because we have been working on this project for a very long period of time, and we've put a lot of money in, we've bought land, and we've expended a lot of money, and we've now been in a holding pattern for a long period of time, but we're prepared to go forward. As you know, a lot of members in the audience here attended our job fair and local contractors fair yesterday. I think over 50 local contractors showed up, and we've been holding together our, you know, construction contracts. We've got contractual obligations with SDG&E, and you know, we're financing this project. We're prepared to move forward, start construction, and we think there's a lot of benefits to Imperial County. And we've entered into a public benefits agreement, and we'll make payments over the next 30 years, and the sales tax over the next 2 years that go directly to the county will be over $5 million. Imperial Irrigation District, I think we've agreed to all the mitigation fees that total over $4.5 million over 30 years, and any impacts to your system. And we're also willing to agree, although I think everyone believes that the ultimate responsibility on the network upgrades is going to be less than the $14.5 million. You know, we're prepared to post that security in order to move forward, because it's important to move forward. These projects, if they don't move forward, sometimes they fail. And we've been holding this project together for quite some time, and we're prepared to move forward. And we think we've agreed to, you know, a very fair deal that we would post our security, and if ultimately we're not responsible, the money would be refunded to us if other generators are paying or if the network upgrades aren't needed. We are interconnected to the Cal ISO system at Imperial Valley Substation. That is, our LGIA, Large Generator Interconnection Agreement, is with San Diego Gas and Electric. And it does detail that we will build the Drew switchyard and turn it over to them. And then I understand you've got the MOU with them. But from our perspective, we originally proposed to interconnect to build a Gen-Tie line directly into Imperial Valley Substation, a much less expensive proposition. And there was concern about having multiple lines running from multiple generators. And because we owned our land that we bought from the IID, we were willing to locate the Drew switchyard on our site, and we permitted it, and we're building it at our expense, such that other generators, including the C Solar agreement that you're going to discuss in North-South line, rather than them build their, you know, temporary crossing they would build up north and go through Drew Switchyard as well as future projects. And so that's why, Drew Switchyard came about. One crossing of the West Side Main Canal, Wormwood Canal. And it's time sensitive from that standpoint too, because Sea Solar's financed, and at some point they're going to have to build that other line. So approving this now allows us to move forward, allows that line not to be built. It allows other projects to move forward. And I believe there's a lot of people who are counting on the revenues and the jobs from this project. And we are prepared to post this security, which we think is, quite a bit in excess of what ultimately would be our responsibility, but we're willing to post it because we know it's important to move this project forward. And, it's not certain what'll happen if we can't get these agreements in place such that we can close financing and start building the project.
What's the total cost of your 170 megawatts?
It's approximately $700 million investment.
Okay. Is there any questions from Director Hanks?
Let me share this, and I'll address this to Mr. Kelly while you're here. The issue that we have with the blackout and the RAS agreement that we entered into, which was really quite neighborly of us to do it the way we did. It was the cost of the neighboring utilities was very low. And the first thing that happened when there was a blackout, we got turned on like a pack of dogs. Yeah. And if FERC had made their final determination, this wouldn't be an issue right now. This would be a mandate. And all I'm saying is this, okay? What they're offering may be fair, but it's just not their project. It's other projects to come. And we can't wait till we get down the road. It has to be now. But at the same time, we need to offer a cap, a protection that they move forward. And there's 99.9% chance that they'll probably get money back when they all come on. But we can't take that risk. And furthermore, like in the RAS agreement, that 1.2 million that was originally quoted as the effective study was basically another RAS agreement. It wouldn't provide any more protection than what we had before. Only now we just don't have the generators from Mexico coming in and impacting our line. We have 800 megawatts out there, maybe more. There's going to be some come from the direct ties in Arizona to the SWIPL coming into the IV sub. So there's going to be a large number. We can't wait with a RAS. We have to have protection in place. And that protection is the liability of CalISO lines. That is their responsibility. They're impacting our line. Okay? And all I'm saying is make sure that we have a procedure and what we approve gives us that protection.
That is correct about the RAS. Mr. Ivy asked the board to suspend it going into the summer for operational reasons, but it's fallen woefully short of protecting IID, and it was called out in the FERC report, as you know, as being deficient. So,
but up to that measure that RAS was intended to prevent, they should not have to pay for that.
No, they shouldn't. And I think the disparity in the two, between the study and the restudy, is the September 8th event and the absolute need that Centinela, has for its own reasons contested. That we can't purely rely on remedial actions. At some point you have to have physical improvements, and the problem for this project is that it has to go to a financier, and and any mention of the total universe, and he triggers having to monetize the full amount. So I believe that we can capture the specific request or recommendation that we're making to your board is authorization to execute an agreement. And I would like Director Hanks to be able to capture what you suggest with an absolute cap that's reimbursable based on the cluster, but also based on a realistic base case that we can vet from Cal ISO.
You know, what I'm asking, I guess, in this, if you want to issue a conditional use, you know, so that they have a satisfaction over moving forward with this, it's going to be one way or the other. And I don't, realistically, I don't think they're going to take the IID side of this, the fairness of the IID side. But I think what we're asking is not unreasonable. It doesn't violate the MOU that was signed. The political judgment decisions that go into this, we're always looked at as a little speck in the sand down here, a nuisance to everybody. With the state, we have participated now. Urban area has their transmission. We pretty much limit, you know, I would have loved to have had that substation on the other side of West Side Main, but I walked away from that. I walked away from absolutely no PTO, okay? So I feel like I've made movement. And what I'm suggesting here is that the possible risk that they take with this concept would be maybe 20% of what they're putting up. But to the IID ratepayer, it's much bigger. It could be our whole system down the road. And I don't think that's too much to ask for. And at the end of the day, I don't think it costs them a dime.
Well, subject to conferring with Mr. King, I would put the question to the board that subject to the reasonableness of it, I would like to be authorized to execute an agreement so the project moves forward along the general lines that I'll have to consult the record to...
Let me put it this way. I'll make a motion that the recommendation that I put forward be incorporated into these agreements.
We can't do it.
Okay. And I believe this would take care of the crossing and the affected studies. Okay. We still have the Sea Solar, and I think that puts it on hold because I don't think they want to build a bridge nowhere if it collapses. They have a crossing already. They have options. Okay. But I think this falls in. They have a safe haven from the 2.5 when they agreed to 7.5 under this proposal. We've already approved that, so that's water under the bridge. If we hadn't approved that 7.5, their effective study would have been much higher too. But that one, you know, that's part of being the first one in this game. This is all new business for us, and we're trying to straighten it out. And so my proposal would to go with this, send you back to the table with these people, sit down and go over this. If there's something that doesn't fit, it gives you a chance to consult with the governor, Mr. Picker, Mr. Avery, whoever you want to consult with. But you got your third vote then.
Could you make that a part of the second of the affected system study item?
Yeah, this would clear up your affected study too.
Excuse me, Director Hanks.
Mr. King had a comment.
Mr. Kelly, if I may. I think part of Director Hank's proposal was that the Drew Switchyard become an IID facility. And
I didn't say that.
Okay. I guess, Mike,
Let me-
let me listen my
Well, let
my
me
concern.
read so you'll be
Okay.
sure you know exactly. New facilities are defined as new 230 kV lines connecting the new 230 kV Drew substation to the existing 230 kV Imperial Valley substation. Okay. Then these facilities, these new facilities will operate under Cal ISO.
I thought he said they were going to be given to IID. I wrote that down.
All right, so you're talking about new connections from.
I don't know what the
What we're looking at, that gives us, as I mentioned in your office, I'm looking for the sutures where we've carved out and we've protected our system moving forward.
to meet with him to go over his proposal because I want to vote.
And so any new lines coming in, they come, we do the planning,
You've got a turbo record.
so forth.
Mr. Hanks just now said this is something that he talked to you about at your office, and I assume that was a meeting that you had on Sunday with Mr. Hanks. Was there some reason that the rest of the board wasn't totally made aware of some of these changes when we bring this to a vote?
I've never heard this plan before.
I'll guarantee you nobody has seen this. I learned a long time ago, keep your friends close and your enemies even closer.
Okay, Mr. Kelly, you'd ask Mr. Hanks that if he would make this motion that he's talking about a part of the affected system study, that we would still move forward with the action item we were talking about, where you would have the right to, working with Mr. Garber, to negotiate on, this says, take action to authorize the general manager and general counsel to execute the Centinela TCLA and associate documents on behalf of IID. You were still looking for that, and then what Director Hanks is talking about, you wanted that to be part of what he's working with on the second one we're coming on.
Yeah, I believe I made a motion. I'm waiting on second.
Well, I'm trying to, okay,
Yeah,
I'll
can we-
second your
I
motion
don't
for
know
discussion.
I don't know what the motion is.
But your
board
motion
members. I
includes
just need some.
the crossing license agreement, correct?
Yeah.
That includes that's part of your motion?
Yeah, I will give this to Mr.
Okay.
Kelly. If he has questions with it,
Okay,
I'll sit
but
down
just
and
just
try
so
to
I'm clear,
explain it.
Director
And if
Hanks.
there's some caveats, work through it. But I want that protection for our ratepayer.
Okay, and I'm just talking about housekeeping right now. The motion that's being offered is a motion to accept, to take action to execute, authorize staff to execute the TCLA if Director Hanks's proposals with regard to
My motion was to take this and then bring it back for.
so you want us to revise the TCLA and the effective system agreement to incorporate your proposals?
Yes.
Okay.
And what I'm proposing here is cut and paste into the existing. It doesn't change a whole lot.
So it's not really a motion, because we're going to bring this back. What you're
Yes.
proposing is that we take the effective system agreement, which has not been reduced to an agreement. We take the TCLA, which has. We modify them to incorporate your proposal, which I've got in my notes, but I'm going to have to take a look at Gloria's notes as well.
Bring it back for that. final
That's what
vote.
you're suggesting. So I don't think that's a motion that we can take action on right now, based on what I understand.
Okay, so,
I retract my second?
Well, I don't know that it's a motion, and I'm not trying to be flip. I'm
But you have an alternative, so
Right.
if you want what's existing here, bring it forward. See whether it passes.
I don't understand, Director Hanks. You're saying we
Well,
can...
I think you understand quite well.
Well, I'm not sure, but...
I understand.
well, explain what you understand.
I understand.
All these people
I wanna
sitting
hear
over,
what
all these
you
people sitting
understand.
over here with what I'm proposing to guarantee they have a job.
Right.
I haven't killed any job. I haven't done anything but protect the IID ratepayer and the IID. That's all I've done.
The IID ratepayer is sitting out here in the audience. And what's the risk to the IID ratepayer when we don't move certain projects forward that create jobs, skilled jobs, better paying jobs here in the Imperial Valley to keep the valley alive for people working and living here?
I'll guarantee you that our staff has killed a whole lots more jobs. This doesn't kill anything.
I'm not saying it's killing anything. I'm willing to move forward and try to work things out. We've been working on this thing, as Mr. King says, for over 2 years. This is nothing new.
Yeah.
Staff's been working on this.
Yep.
Board's been working on this.
The board's been working on it since November 1st.
No, the board's been working on it much longer than that. Much longer.
Yeah, that's exactly why we had number 11 on this agenda.
Okay, Mr. Kelly, would you explain what it is that Director Hanks is trying to ask us to do?
I believe that on the second item dealing with the affected system study, that Director Hanks would like for his proposal to be grafted onto it and for the cap to be placed at $18 million, with the proviso that as other projects in a cluster to be restudied come on, costs could be recouped by Centinela.
And in addition, the TCLA would have to be revised to the extent necessary to incorporate his proposal. And
Laura McDonald, not to put you on a spot, I saw you shaking your head about something. Was there anything you wanted to say on this, or you're fine?
My head's a little confused.
Yeah, you have come to the podium, please, if you have a question to ask on this, since you represent San Diego Gas and Electric.
Thank you. I think, as most of you know, I'm not the one who was negotiating and working with your staff and the developers on this, and so I would really need an opportunity, I think, to make sure that Kevin can talk to those at SDG&E who have been working on this, particularly Jim Avery, who I know you've all been know has been involved in this. And so I just honestly don't know, Kevin, with all the negotiations that have gone on in the MOU and what's on record today, how that changes it. So we also have not been privy to what Mr. Hanks gave us here today. So I just don't know. Sitting here, I'm a little with all of you on what this means.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, Mr. King.
Yeah, Mr. President, there were a couple of points that I noted from Director Hanks' proposal that caused me concern, because legally we probably can't do them, or they would not work for the project. And maybe I just misheard, but one was and he said that IID ownership of Drew Switchyard was not part of it, but I thought I heard that IID would construct and own the Drew Switchyard and the lines.
I did say that, okay. And I'm trying to keep this consistent with the MOU, and that's something I need to discuss with you, Mr. Kelly, because in the MOU, we retain partial ownership of the Drew sub. And unless the PPTO was disallowed by.
That is correct.
Yeah, so that is an issue.
Director Hanks,
you did hear correct.
Director Hanks, if I may, we also have the provision to be able to extend the use of the Drew substation. It's a 4-terminal facility now to incorporate all the generation tie lines, but we'll have the ability to expand another, I think it's 4 lines for our own use at that point.
Yeah, and my concern is not the ultimate ownership of Drew Switchyard. We've agreed already, pursuant to our LGIA with CalISO and SDG&E, to build Drew Switchyard and to turn it over. And we've designed it such that it can be expanded, and IID was involved in that layout and expansion design. And my concern is that our point of interconnection for our project under our original interconnection request and under our LGIA is Imperial Valley Substation. So these are Gen-Tie facilities, and if IID if we were not to build it and then turn it over and then allow you and SDG&E under your MOU, to come to your agreement, if our point of interconnection changed because now our interconnection was with IID, and we did this up front, we'd no longer in the queue.
I understand that.
So
that can be worked
so
out.
what happens in the MOU, after the fact, we've made designs in our plans to allow for what IID wants, and that was the intention, is that it gets turned over and SDG&E and IID have this MOU on who's going to own it and who's going to operate, who handles interconnection requests. But I thought I might have heard that you were changing the order and you wanted that all up front in these agreements, and from a timing standpoint,
we'll work through that.
That wouldn't work.
I'm telling you, I know I'm on the bubble, okay? And I'm trying to make it work.
I understand.
And I'm trying to get to a point that I feel comfortable to move on with it.
I think if the rest of the board concurs with this, Director Hanks is probably having to make some significant concessions in order to even support this project. And in recognition of that, I would like to be able to come back to you after consulting with Mr. King and with San Diego and others, better minds than mine, about how we can get there and prepare something that you can vote on.
And just so it's clear, a lot of these things we're talking about are not things that IID and Centinela would agree to. Some of these issues about network issues and CalISO issues would require San Diego and CalISO. Neither San Diego or CalISO are a party to the Effective System Agreement or the TCLA. So for us to address these items, it's going to be with other written vehicles and in other forms, which we are having meetings with them. And I'd like to talk to you maybe after to make sure I understand what you're proposing so we can see what we can do with it. But it's certainly not something that we can work out with Centinela because they don't have the ability to make these agreements.
I have a question to ask because I know time is of the essence with these solar projects and investments money-wise. I think Mr. King said they got a $700 million investment. They're dealing with financing. That's changing constantly. What are you talking about on trying to take care of some of these issues that Director Hanks has heartburn with? What's the timeline here? Are you talking about 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months?
Last week.
I would propose having something together so that you can vote next week.
Are you have the ability and working with SDG&E and CalISO to be able to put something like that together?
I imagine that San Diego will be easy to talk to right away.
Okay, well, it's fine. If you can bring it back in a week, that's great. Go ahead,
so, Mr. Kelly, it would be item number 13 and 12 and 13. What about number 14? Is that?
14 is obviously wrapped up in both these items as well.
So you'll bring.
Well, we should talk. Is 14 the north-south line?
Yes.
We should talk about that. We have a contractual obligation. We agreed to build that line. We're being paid by C Solar to build that line. I don't mind if we bring the issue back.
Mr. Garber, if we're going to bring back number 12 and 13 next week, I'd rather just bring all three items next week,
fine.
and we can discuss them at that time.
That's fine. But we should consider that separately than
I understand, but we'll bring the three of them together next week.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I want to, as one member of this three-person committee or three-person board that has to vote on this, and we do need 3 votes to move forward. I just want to say that we've all worked long and hard on this project, on all of these solar projects, whether it's with C Solar, Tenaska, with Centinela, even with Solar Gen 2 up in the north end. And I know that the unions are here. The governor's office has sent a letter down. Plenty of people have sent letters asking us to pass this. And I know that Director Hanks has his concerns, and they're valid concerns. And I understand because I've been in meetings with him, both in closed session and open session, along with my fellow board members, and trying to work these issues out. But this is all about green, renewable energy. The state mandated us to get into the green energy business, whether it's geothermal or solar or whatever it is. And the county is a land use planning agency. It's private property rights. People that own private property, I know Kate Bishop's here in the audience. She's part of that. She has a right to put solar on her property if that's what she wants to do. She goes to the county, works for the solar companies, they get permitted. And they get all that put together, and then the IID gets involved. And we had the crossing of the west side main. Otherwise, there would be radial lines running from Sea Solar over to IV Sub, from Centinela, and from Campo Verde that's coming behind all of this. And I think that we've tried our best to do this in a very organized manner. And we're working on a PPTO. There's been a lot of IID staff time put into this thing and a lot of meetings. And we put a lot of work and effort into trying to do this thing right and working with all these people. And if it takes another week, it takes another week to try to make this thing right, to satisfy some of the concerns that Director Hanks has. But the main thing I want to say is, I think all of us sitting up here on this board that have to make decisions that's elected by the public are concerned about the ratepayer. Ratepayer is vital to us. We're a public agency, but we're also concerned about the ratepayer and moving projects forward to create jobs for this valley, to keep this valley alive and keep people working and keep their families living here. That's important too. So hopefully, through some negotiations, we can get something worked out here that satisfies all of the board members sitting up here and the solar companies and the county and the governor's office and everybody that's involved. Thank you. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I shared Mr. Hanks' concerns about these agreements because, to be frank with you, they gave me heartburn from the very beginning. But in order to go forward with providing jobs for the Imperial Valley, for helping the state of California with green energy and so forth, I would like the IID to be a player, but to be a player that's respected, and to be a player where we are respected as a partner and shown equal treatment. And I'm glad that Mr. Hanks brought all his concerns, because those are concerns that I had, but I had not brought him out to the table. And I'm glad he did. And with his concerns being spoken out here today, and with Mr. Kelly and SDG&E and the rest of you folks getting together this week, come back next week, and we can all vote for the projects. Because I do want them to go forward. But like both of Mr. Hanks and Mr. Menville said, we all want to protect the ratepayer. And we need jobs for the ratepayers. I look at the union guys. These are hardworking, everyday people, and they deserve to have a good paying job. That's why it irks me that some of these projects are being held hostage by two women that have the privileged life. That these women, they get royalties from geothermal leases, and yet it's okay for them, but not for the rest of the valley, and that's wrong. That's wrong. That's why I like for these projects to go forward so these folks can have a decent paying job.
Could I make one last statement?
Yeah, go ahead, Director Hanks.
In supporting what Director Mendoza just said, and getting the respect for the IID up and down the state, right now, projects that have been approved with purchase power agreements and those that are pending approval. There's 13,187 megawatts in California that's been approved. We've had a ruling come from the acting commissioner, PUC, saying treat IID as though they have 1,400 RA, and that's a technical issue. Currently, in the IID grid, pending on the solar, 150 megawatts. And we're supposed to be the energy capital. We're the ones that everybody is looking at the geothermal resources, and what we do on this PPTO is going to be important on that PAF 42 build out. The cooperation that we show here should trigger some cooperation the other way. Let's just hope it doesn't end up like the Salton Sea.
Okay, Mr. Kelly, so what do you want to do on this then?
I want to reconnoiter over the next couple of days, and our goal will be to agendize something for next Tuesday's meeting. It may very well be that we have to have you meet in special session.
That's fine.
If there's a fatal flaw in this, that's a deal killer? I want to know right away.
I'll be sure and tell you.
So this is on item 12 and 13, and what's the deal on Sea Solar on item number 14?
We're going to go ahead and proceed in good faith with the north-south line until you act, which we hope will be as early as next Tuesday.
So 12, 13, and 14 will be voted upon next Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, why don't we take a little break, and then we'll come back and start off with item 15. We're going to call the meeting back to order.
You want to serve in this committee? You want to be the? You want to be it again?
It doesn't matter to me. I mean, it's local here now.
I'll appoint you.
Glasses, man.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, we're going to go to item number 15. This is appointment of new commissioner of the Coachella Valley Conservation Commission. And
I'd like to nominate John Pierre as a new CVCC commissioner.
okay, is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay, please vote. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 16, which is take positions on AB 642 and HR 5381. Antonio, go ahead.
Good afternoon, President Menville, directors. Before you today are two legislative proposals, one state, one federal, and two staff recommendations if you want to take them individually, and then in the end, if there's something different than my recommendation, then you can separate them. But I will go through them individually, starting first with AB 642, which is the algae designation zone bill that we have already discussed previously. But what that bill does specifically, it establishes the Salton Sea Stabilization and Agricultural Cultivation Act. And what that would do is it would give authority to the Natural Resources Agency at the state level to establish an algae production program in the Imperial Valley. As part of this new program, the Secretary would provide grants to research institutions and commercial enterprises, so the private sector, who intend to develop demonstration projects leading to algae production and commercialization in and around the Salton Sea. One requirement of such grant eligibility is for commercial enterprises to enter into revenue sharing agreements with the state. Additionally, the Secretary would also be required to publish a report by July 1st, 2013 that enumerates the environmental and economic benefits of this industry. Now, there were some concerns raised by both Riverside County and Imperial County, as well as the Salton Sea Authority and IID, about how this bill was initially drafted and amended and presented. And one of those concerns was that the revenue that would be created and returned to the state did not have a specific fund of where that money would go. So during negotiations, or at least conversations with the author, the local stakeholders, including IID, raised that question to the author. And during this last committee hearing, when that bill was heard, he did make an amendment to correct and to state that funding generated by any production of this such program, if it were to be adopted and even signed into law, would go into an algae production program fund, thereby creating a specific fund that would allow other Salton Sea renewable or restoration mitigation projects to be funded with those dollars. That was an amendment that he made and put in the bill. But now there's, at least the recommendation that I am providing to you today is to oppose the bill unless it is amended. And the amendment that we would request is that there would be a participation or mechanism for local involvement. Because again, even with the amendments that were made on this final version, or that at least the latest version that you have before you today, there is no reference to an involvement of IID, Coachella Valley Water District, Imperial, or Riverside County. and even some other stakeholders, which include landowners in the Salton Sea area, BLM, Torres Martinez Tribe, again, IID. So for those reasons, the bill as drafted, although still provides I think a positive direction to mitigation and possible algae production around the sea, the main concern is, and will continue to be until the author agrees, to allow local participation in this process.
Mr. Ortega, I would prefer to oppose it unless, oppose it and eliminate unless amended. I would like to send a strong message to Mr. Calderon and just oppose it outright. I tried that at the Salton Sea Authority, and Corky and I were the only ones that voted to have it opposed, and then it was voted on to oppose as amended. I prefer to send a stronger message, but it's up to this board.
I was the one that killed her vote.
Yes, I know.
In Salton Sea Authority.
Like always a compromiser.
My position on it is to follow your advice, oppose unless amended. And I know that they added on the provision regarding the locals, but I also think we need to send a strong message that the IID intends to be compensated for our return flows.
Okay.
I think that's a revenue stream that needs to come back to the IID. They're particularly down the road, if there's shortages and there's requirements to recycle some of our tail and tile water, if we don't have the strength to it, we have to make sure that return flow is still ours.
Part of what this production program or incentive for algae production would call for a multi-state or multi-stakeholder involvement group and report, which was July 1st by 2013. Whereas where I would recommend, and in our amendments to the author, we would add IID and Imperial County, Riverside County, and that's the forum where those issues can be vetted. Any requests that we have as a landowner in that area, in that region, we would be at the table. But to give authority to the Natural Resources Agency, who has no ownership, number one, over any lands in and around the Salton Sea, and number two, which has very little detail as to what their role is going to be, aside from a blanket authority from this Assembly member's bill, is troublesome. And that's why, again, I would suggest that we do take an opposed position, which sends a strong message, but we are also willing to compromise with our position, and that compromise is that we must be included in every step of this program if adopted. Ultimately, the governor might decide to veto this bill, and then it goes nowhere. But if it were to be enacted, we have that protection in place where we are included and at the table. So that is my recommendation on this.
Is there a motion to Antonio's recommendation?
Can we hear something from the audience?
Okay, that's fine. Sure, I don't have a problem with that. Tom?
Thanks. Tom Sefton, Brawley. It's a bit of a technical point, but it's an important one. And down on page 82, there's one item that has been amended, item G. It says initiating the algae program used to say will, now says may have the immediate benefit of reducing fine particulate air pollution. That's actually a very key thing to consider. And if you do oppose with and ask for an amendment, I would suggest considering this issue. I've had a chance to talk to some of the people at San Diego State and others that are pushing some of these algae pond proposals. And in general, having algae treating the water before it goes to the Salton Sea is a benefit by pulling nutrients out of the sea, and it provides an economic benefit if they can get to the point that algae production actually pays for itself. And they're not quite there yet, but R&D is what gets you there. The Wright brothers plane didn't pay for itself either, but eventually we have commercial aviation. However, the thing you got to consider is The ponds they're thinking about putting in are brackish water ponds using river water. Now, these ponds have a higher evaporation rate than the much more saline water in the Salton Sea. So what happens if you cover an area of playa with a brackish water pond, yes, you will prevent dust emission from that covered area of playa. However, you will have a higher evaporation rate from the surface of that pond. So the amount of water flowing out of that pond into the Salton Sea is going to be less than it would be if the river was just flowing straight to the sea without passing through the pond. What it does is you have an increased net evaporation rate from the sea pond conglomerate as a whole, and that means that the sea shrinks faster. And while you do cover some playa with these ponds, you're actually causing the sea to go down even faster than it otherwise would. So you're exposing more playa faster than you otherwise would without the ponds. So if you do these ponds, there's a couple of solutions to that. One, to do an evaporation control on the surface of the ponds so they evaporate less. Two, to use saltwater algae instead of brackish or freshwater algae, and those do exist also. So what you could consider in recommended amendments is to do something to the effect that any ponds implemented on a commercial scale should not increase the net evaporation rate or the net shrinkage of the Salton Sea. And I hope you take that into consideration. Otherwise, I would say that having somebody at the state level paying for R&D on this concept is good if it goes forward in a way that takes into account the local considerations, allows IID to have a say in this, allows all the local entities to have a say in this, and covers this potential problem that I raised here. Thanks.
Go ahead, Antonio.
And again, I will just reiterate that the assembly member who is pushing this bill forward has not really gone to that level of detail, and that is why he drafted this multi-stakeholder work group that would be created by this legislation to look at all the issues, including the use of water and where would these projects be sited? If there is going to be some type of a state grant created, there have to be additional components that will be looked at throughout this 1 year evaluation process. And then the Natural Resources Agency would come back to the public and to the legislature and give them those recommendations. So again, this is a framework that would be created with a possible grant program created for algae production in and around the Salton Sea.
Okay, is there anybody else from the audience that want to speak on this issue? Did somebody want to make a motion on Antonio Ortega's recommendation?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to oppose unless amended.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, please vote. Okay, Antonio, go on to H.R. 5381.
H.R. 5381 is a federal legislation introduced by Congressman Flake out of Arizona. And what this bill would do, and it gets a little bit technical, and what I'll do is I will provide you with some background on what the Clean Air Act and the exceptional event rules are, but let me just read to you what I wrote here and then provide you with some additional background. This bill would enact the Common Sense Legislative Exceptional Events Reform Act of 2012. And what that means is that it would require EPA, federal EPA, to make a determination on exceptional event demonstrations within 90 days of submittal, and would further revise that the criteria used to determine approval or disapproval of such requests. As drafted, the proposed changes would also provide clarity and regulatory certainty to the area agencies involved, including the Imperial County Air Pollution Control District, who has been working on its own exceptional event rules dating back to 2002, possibly 2003. The county and APCD have also taken a support position on this bill, but just to provide a brief background on exceptional event rules, the Clean Air Act adopted the exceptional events rule in 2007. And with these new rules, the exceptional events were classified as events that are naturally occurring ones is one of the classifications. That would qualify as an exceptional event. And some of those examples would be high windstorms, dust storms, sandstorms, and wildfires. In and around the Salton Sea, we have some future or currently some exposed playa, and that's why we have air quality monitoring by the county APCD. So that is a reason that this ties into the district. The natural occurring events and the process that was developed has proven to be lengthy, cumbersome, sometimes expensive because of potential lawsuits with the states and federal EPA. So what this Congress member has decided to do is give some type of a timeline where federal EPA, when they review these exceptional event demonstrations or events, have a 90-day window to come back and either approve or disapprove to the states and then down to the local air agencies. By giving them that timeline, they are not in limbo.
What is the time frame now?
There is none.
There is none, so they
Correct.
take whatever time
and
they need.
that has been the issue that has been brought forward.
So on the average, well, how much time does it take for it to come back?
Well, Brad might be able to answer that, given that they've been at this for about 7-8 years, but there are other states like New Mexico and I believe Arizona who have their own circumstances. But
morning, afternoon, actually now. Brad Porres, Air Pollution Control Officer. Antonio's right. There isn't a timeline placed on EPA right now for their evaluation, so there is no accountability for EPA in this whole exceptional events rule. Several agencies, ours included, my state association, several regional state organizations have commented on recently released exceptional events guidance. Part of the comments, or the most current theme in the comments, was that there's no accountability by EPA, there's no timeline by which they're held to review these. Typically, to answer your question, it takes anywhere upwards 6 months to a year to get approval or concurrence in this case, or non-concurrence. By waiting that long, it can impact an agency or a county, in our case, in their attempts to get a state implementation plan approved. So, and if you can't get that concurrence on those exceptional events, then you're redesignated basically to a much worse designation, which would require future, more stringent rules on sources of, in our case, PM10. So we have been working on this actually diligently over the last year and a half, and they just recently, on June 27th, released the second revised guidance on the exceptional events rule to hopefully start addressing the issues that Congressman Flake is bringing up in his legislation. And Antonio's right, the County Board of Supervisors as well as the Air Pollution Control District, and I think the Farm Bureau also supported this legislation.
So if EPA doesn't make a determination and expect a sectional event within 90 days, then what happens after that?
With the Congress,
if this passes, what happens then?
Yeah, with the Congressman's language, if they fail to make a determination within that 90 days, then it's considered approved.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Is there a motion for this recommendation?
Move to support.
To support?
I'll second that.
Okay, please vote. Thank you. Moving on to item number 17, payment of invoices from Imperial Valley and Calexico Enterprise Zones, plus updates by respective managers. Antonio.
Once again, board members, Antonio Ortega, Government Affairs. As part of our membership to the Imperial Valley Enterprise Zone and the Calexico Enterprise Zone, this month we have our dues are up, or our membership. The 2012-2013 invoice has been submitted and it is in your packet for information. So we are asking, once again, the board to approve the invoice for 2012-2013. And in addition to that, I have here today with us both enterprise zone managers, and I would actually like them to come up here and just provide you with a brief update on any recent activity or important items that they might want to share with you regarding their individual or their respective enterprise zones. So
Okay.
Danny?
Daniel and Diane. Diane, you let this board, IID board, know what's happening with you too, please.
Okay. President Minville, members of the IID Board, Diane Kaysen, manager of the Imperial Valley Enterprise Zone. We just recently finished our fiscal year, and we're proud to say that we issued 393 vouchers to companies for their tax credits, and 300 is our goal with the HCD, so we surpassed that by quite a bit, and there's 33 new jobs created according to those vouchers, so that's good for the North End. What President Minville was referring to was that recently I gave my letter of resignation. I will be leaving the Imperial Valley Enterprise Zone effective the end of this month, and as of July 30th, I will be taking a new position at Cal Energy, which I'm very excited about. And so the board had a special meeting, and they decided to go ahead and try to replace me. So they are flying the job. It will be in the newspaper. It will be on Cal Jobs. It's at the CAZ site, and so that will be taking place. They hope to have somebody in place by September. So hopefully someone else will be reporting here to you soon. The assistant at the Imperial Valley Enterprise Zone is capable of managing the zone in my absence. She's did it before when they had to replace the first manager before I came on board. So she's able to do that. We do have a couple of pending things. The report that's due to HCD for 2 years will be prepared, and that information, once I've been working on it, it's just about done, but that information will be provided to you at some future date. And we do have a pending expansion that's going through right now for synthetic genomics. So those two things are being taken care of hopefully before I leave. And I just wanted to thank the board for their support, all the support they've given me throughout my tenure. And I really appreciate it. You guys have been great, especially President Minville, who is the chair of my board, and he's done a great job. So I certainly appreciate John Pierre's help.
Yeah, no, you've been there 4 years.
Yes.
And you were always a self-starter, and you were well motivated to get the job done. And we appreciate your service. And I think Cal Energy's going to get a very good person there.
they
I
hope
know
so.
Mark's grand's going to take a little break. So
Yeah, well, as they told me today, I have a lot to learn, so I look forward to that. So that's my report, and thank you very much.
yeah,
Do you have any
one
questions?
thing since Daniel's here, I know that 2 invoices, Calexico's $45,000 and we're $57,000. Was there some reason why there's a difference in the two
Well,
billings?
it just depends on what the board, there's 2 distinct boards, and typically the boards go with the recommendation of the cities.
Right.
And the city of Brawley decided to fund the zone at its fully committed rate of $180,000. There was approximately $8,000 left over from last year, so we were able to reduce the price for each entity, and the decision of the Calexico board was different from
Okay,
from
I
Brawley.
just wanted you to explain that, that's all.
Yeah, and typically the IID and the county follow what the cities decide to do, so that's how
Does
that
anybody have any questions for Diane from the Pearl Valley Enterprise Zone?
Good luck with your new job.
Thank you.
Okay, Diane, thank
Okay,
you.
thank
go,
you.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Daniel Fitzgerald, manager of the Calexico Imperial County Enterprise Zone. First of all, I'd like to actually thank Diane. She did an excellent job there. It was certainly a pleasure being able to work with her in the time I've been there. Most of our marketing efforts outside of the county and a good portion of our marketing efforts inside the county were done as a joint between the 2 enterprise zones. Inside the county, of course, working with different accountants and bookkeepers and businesses that may have businesses in both zones. And it was a pleasure being able to work with her and being able to do that type of cooperation by bringing new business to Imperial County and also helping those businesses here flourish. From our perspective, from the Calexico Enterprise Zone, we just also finished our fiscal year. We had over 448 vouchers that were processed. Of those, 78 represented brand new positions. And so what these vouchers are, just a quick clarification, is these are hiring credits that are submitted for basically to determine eligible employees to receive a tax credit on their California corporate taxes. And so each one of these represents a new hire. So they designate whether that's a replacement position or a new position. So 78 of those that we know of were designated as new positions. So that's a new job created, and it's expansion of a particular business. So we're excited to be able to have that. And that also represents 38 companies that are taking advantage of this credit. We anticipate that's going to hopefully expand, because as we get more of these types of vouchers, that means businesses are having tax events, which means they're making money. And hopefully we're going to start seeing more and more of that. But we've had some good marketing efforts over the past year. We do have one new business that's coming into Calexico that's tied in with their corporate headquarters in Vista and a large facility they have in Mexicali. They're going into the north side of Calexico. We worked with the county workforce development office and are able to get 40 people hired right off the bat. So that was also exciting. We were able to have.
What kind of businesses can you?
It's a manufacturing company. They actually manufacture diving equipment, and so they needed a facility in the U.S. because of their military contracts.
Make a motion to approve.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and second. Please vote. All right, thank you. Thank you, Diane, and thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Antonio, for helping with the presentation. We'll move on to number 18, review acknowledgments of audit covering purchase card expenses for 2011. Betty?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm here to present our 2010 Visa expense report and associated Visa P-card statements. For the first 9 months from January to September 30th of 2011, the transaction were recorded in the old Visa P-card management system, and for the last 3 months of the year, the transactions were recorded in the new Visa Cal card management system. In our 2010 P-card expense audit report we gave last year, we made 8 recommendations. All of those now have been implemented. Responsible personnel from the finance department made a commendable effort to train IID staff in the use of the new CalCard system, as well as developing a standard operating procedure to be used in conjunction with the revised purchasing card policy approved by you in November 2011. Our examination of the travel and training expenses documented demonstrates a declining trend over the past 4 years. For example, in 2008, our total expenditure for training and travel was $1.3 million. In 2011, it was a little bit over $864,000. We randomly selected transaction incurred during 2011, and it showed that our travel policies 1540A and 1540B and the revised purchasing card policy 2465 are working as intended. In the expense reports that we reviewed, we found only 2 expenditures that were processed and paid despite of not being accompanied by an itemized receipt. Each of these transactions were under $15. We also examined the approval of expenditure and associated expense reports of the Energy Department's field personnel for overtime meals, because we found that 100% of these expenditures had the proper detailed receipts and the proper authorizing signatures. A reason we did that, 100% of examining of those expenditures, as we had some problems in the past years. Also in 2010 P-card expense audit report we presented to you last year, we addressed the lack of the documented settlement process. The existing process lacked of a routine reconciliation of the summary reports of the monthly payment made to Visa for account settlement. And unlike in previous years we audited, there's now a clear recorded reconciliation of the summary reports to the monthly payments made to Visa for account settlement. And also the Visa card payments are segregated from the other payment activities made to U.S. Bank by IID, therefore making it easily accessible and verifiable, of course. During our field work, it came to our attention that the amount of time personnel spent checking meal expenditure and associated itemized receipts, both by the cardholder supervisor, as well as the responsible personnel from the finance department, is excessive. Currently, there are 5 different policies and in place covering meal expenditures inside and outside the service territory, overtime meals, and such. The one thing all these policies have in common is the various amounts employees may spend on meals in various situations. If the employees provide itemized receipts, they may spend up to $59 per day inside the service territory and up to $64 per day outside the service territory if they use their Visa card to purchase the meal. These expenditure amounts are set by the federal travel regulation and per diem rate, and that's what we follow, and that's how those rates were established. However, our policy states that if employees do not provide an original itemized receipt, they are eligible for $30 per diem for the duration of a trip by submitting a written explanation. So we concluded that much time is spent by staff preparing, approving, submitting, and checking the meal expenditure documentation. Sometimes trying to get reimbursed for a $17 expenditure made at a place that has a buffet like Golden Corral, for example, you will not get a receipt that covers what kind of meal you ordered. It's a buffet. Yet our policy says, well, you have to have an itemized receipt. So we run across multiple of these situations. So due to the burdensome amount of staff time and administrate and process itemized receipts for all meals, we believe that it would be more effective and efficient for employees to claim the per diem in accordance with the federal travel regulation. And well, however, if employees do wish to request per diem for travel and choose to use their P card, so if I'm going to travel and I choose not to request a per diem or not to request a per diem after my return from the travel and I'm going to use my purchasing card, then the itemized receipt will continue to be required. So therefore, we recommend amending the policies 1540A and B, also 2465 purchasing card policy and policy 1050 travel policy to reflect the applicable federal rate. And talking to the responsible personnel with Mr. DeVoy from HR and of course the CFO, they all agreed that it would be unacceptable, it's an acceptable recommendation. And also we are hopeful, even though we can guarantee this may reduce the number of purchasing cards we have out there for employees.
Okay, is there any questions or a motion to acknowledge the receipt?
I move to acknowledge receipt of the attached audit report.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second it if she'll amend her motion to include, bring back your recommendations for the policy changes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
my
let me
recommendation,
ask
I'm sorry, I didn't read it. My recommendation is to the policies to be brought back to the board to make the... Is the management has accepted that recommendation, so those policies going to be amended.
Okay.
It's going to be amended by the board, of course.
Second the motion.
Okay. Okay, please vote. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, thanks, Betty. Number 19, authorize the chief financial officer to negotiate a substitute letter of credit from Royal Bank of Canada to satisfy conditions of the Siemens contract, El Centro Unit 3 repower project. Mr. Broking?
Yes. As part of the contract with Siemens for the El Centro Unit 3 project, they're required to provide us a letter of credit, and in fact, they have done that. They did that back in August of 2011. That letter of credit expires on July 30th of this month. At the time, the bank that provided that letter of credit was rated AA. And Siemens notified us that the current letter of credit provider was not going to renew it, but a different bank was going to provide a new letter of credit. And that bank is rated substantially below AA. As you may be aware, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch, the major credit agencies, have been reviewing banks in particular, and most, if not all, banks have been downgraded. So at the time, back in 2011, it was not unusual for many banks to be rated AA or above. Now I would say that is unusual. So we have notified Siemens that the replacement letter of credit is not acceptable to us because it is rated too low. And they came back to us with an option. They said they had a banking relationship with JP Morgan or Royal Bank of Canada. The Royal Bank of Canada has 1 AA rating and 2 AA minus ratings, which is the rating just below AA. And so we've been in contact with our financial advisor to discuss whether that would be acceptable and how much risk that would entail to us. And we think there's very minimal risk of accepting Royal Bank as a letter of credit provider. And so that's why I'm here to get board's authorization for me to negotiate a new letter of credit with the Royal Bank of Canada.
Mendoza.
I go ahead and make the motion to accept your recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Good, please vote. Thank you. Last item is acknowledgement of financial report for May 31st, 2012. Mr. Rogan.
Just a few items that I'd like to discuss. I'm on page 102 of the board package. And as you can see on light item 1, through May, these are all through May of this year, energy sales are up a little over 6% compared to budget. They're that's column D, line 1, you'll see that. And then, as Jesse mentioned earlier, I'm moving over to page 105. The overrun on the water sales has resulted in us being over budget through May also by 155,000 acre feet. And then one other thing I'd like to hit on briefly is the water and energy capital projects year to date. And now I'm over on page 109 for energy capital. And as you can see, year-to-date 2012, line 7, it's been about $45 million of capital have been spent so far. Almost half of that is generation, and most of that is from bond proceeds. Almost all of that for generation has been bond proceeds. And although they're projecting to be fairly close to budget for capital expenditures this year, I doubt whether they actually are. And then on the water capital on page 111, column B there, through May they've spent $4.5 million for capital projects, and as you can see, the transfer now they're projecting to be substantially below the budgeted amount, about $4 million as opposed to $15.5 million. And then lastly, just to briefly touch on the cash balances on page 115. Last month, I think I highlighted the working capital for energy was a negative number, in that we were expecting a reimbursement reimburse ourselves bond proceeds for projects that we incurred expenses all on, and that occurred in May. And you can see our cash balance is up to $10 million, but it is still down below what it was at the end of last year.
Where are you looking at on page 115?
115, line item 1. I'm looking at columns D. D is currently what we have in in working capital cash, and column C is what we had at the end of December of 2011. And then lastly, on the water, their unrestricted cash continues to go up. If you look down on line 17, it's $135 million at the end of December 2011. It's 157 at the end of May. We are I am in process working with an investment bank to contact the holders of the water bonds to defease those as soon as possible. So I would expect over the next month or two, if we are successful, or we bring the defeasance documents back to the board, the escrow documents, the unrestricted cash for the water department will decline, but also our debt will also decline. And that's all I had this month for the monthly financials.
Okay, somebody, any questions on what Greg presented? If not, would somebody acknowledge the
Make a motion to acknowledge receipt, and also ask the general manager to look at your capital budget and bring us back a recommendation.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Please vote. Thank you. Okay, that's the end of the meeting. Kevin, we meet next Tuesday.